Okay, so now we're going to move on to something that is totally unplanned, totally and completely, which is, this is usually the time everybody's kind of watching the normal Christmas movies that people tend to around the year, and most people obviously have their different traditional ones, I'm sure. Sometimes even go outside of the holiday itself, but in this particular case, we had always talked about, and even back when we started this, was doing, like, because we do the horror theme through the entire month of October, and it's like doing like a Christmas theme of like the Versus thing. But the problem we run into every time is that it becomes pretty much impossible to pair things up that way. So I just kind of figure this time we would just go through all of those movies, just sort of, just one at a time, just by themselves. Yeah. So I figured we would start with Home Alone. These are basically just the ones that, like, pretty much, like I said, there's no real particular plan, just whichever ones I watch, which are usually the ones I watch over the next couple of weeks or so. So there'll probably be roughly like 10 or 12 of these or something. I'll just talk about them after watching them pretty much, probably. And then the only real one that has a particular place is it's a family tradition with us, the entire family, where it's Christmas Eve. The very last one of the year is Christmas Vacation, so that'll be the last one. So and probably A Christmas Story like right before that. But yeah, so it just sort of landed on. I guess we'll start with Home, because there is some stuff I've talked about before, like The Grinch and probably a few others. For those people, I have done Die Hard way in the past, so there's that too. But yeah, so as far as Home Alone goes, there is something about because we just talked about Planes, Trains, and Automobiles when Thanksgiving came around, and we talked about John Hughes and the way he has that balance of the really over the top humor and then like the sort of sentimentality, I guess you could say. And in a lot of cases, particularly in the case of like Home Alone and the type of movies that spawned it, and even him, there have been many movies after Home Alone where he kind of ripped himself off after a while because it's what studios wanted. And that's kind of the point I'm trying to make, is that despite the criticism he got between trying to balance out the really over-the-top cartoonish slapstick and trying to be sentimental by the end of it, and I can totally see where that criticism comes from, but I think what makes Hughes so great and why his movies still, stand out for people even despite that is when you look at, his teen stuff from the 80s, like The Breakfast Club and Pretty in Pink and all that, and it's like he became known for like having one of the most sincere outlooks of that sort of thing. And then when he got kind of involved in more studio driven stuff, it was like you can tell it's he knows how to do the really sincere stuff, but he also knows how to do exactly what studios want. And these are movies that basically sort of combined that. And I don't know. I still think it works for the most part, and also you bring in Chris Columbus, who directed this and the sequel as well, and there's a really good combination here, I think, where you've got the sort of like how Hughes is really able to play into Kevin's like youthfulness and like his childlike ways, but at the same time you see what Columbus brings. And of course Columbus has done, more grounded comedy drama sort of stuff like Mrs. Doubtfire. But Columbus's name is also pretty synonymous with the fact that he did like the first two Harry Potter movies and some subsequent movies like that first Percy Jackson, if you're into that. And how he's also sort of you associate the fantastical with him also, and sort of seeing fantastical things from a child's point of view, and you can see like hints of that in this also, whether it be the John Williams score, the Oscar-nominated John Williams score, or like moments when the furnace talks to him, which is obviously we know is one of those things where it's not to be taken literally. It's us seeing something through a child who's been home alone for God knows how long. His perspective of seeing this thing that he's always been afraid of in his basement, and in that sense confronting it. And so the combination of the two things actually does really create something sort of magical here. So when you start off, you immediately see how, like, pretty much the entire opening scene before they leave for Paris is setting up how this whole thing happened. Because there are so many, like, it almost seems like such an outlandish concept that Hughes has to throw in so many different things that all add up to one sum, which is he got left behind. And believably, whether it be, you know, the small things like how it was one of those things that like nobody noticed, and like somebody online noticed it, and then it blew up, and now everybody's aware of it. When everybody's trying to clean up all at once in the kitchen after he attacks Buzz, and Peter accidentally throws Kevin's ticket away, so that messes up the count. But then there's the more obvious stuff, like the very beginning when we're introduced to just how hectic the house is. Those great funny moments where Pesci's trying to interact with everybody and it's not working out. And it's to the point that it's so chaotic that even the other people there in the family some of them seem unaware of who even lives in this house and who doesn't, and which kid goes with which family. This movie came out the year I was born, and I feel like that's how long I've been watching it. Like every year, if not more than that. And even today, I still have to like try to figure out again, wait, which part of the family does this kid go with, and so on. And yeah, and then you get some of the family scenes, and this is where the movie also kind of gets some criticism, but I think it's also, there's kind of a point a bit missed when you look at some of the criticism, like the fact that Kevin is our protagonist, but he's extremely bratty. And I think a lot of people take that as, like, when gets, you know, sent up to the third floor, that it's the movie, like, we're supposed to be seeing it from Kevin's perspective when he says, you know, all everybody ever does is dump on me, and I'm the one that gets all of it. But I think the idea is that Kevin is unbearable and bratty. I see no reason that that's not the case, especially with the very early line when he's on the bed and Catherine O'Hara tells him to leave, and he says, "Hang up the phone and make me." That being one of his first lines, I think immediately says the whole idea is that, you know, he's unbearable and bratty, and then that's the whole point when we get to the end with the sentimentality, that it's not just, oh, he's happy now because his mom came home. There is like a whole lesson learned, and that's pretty blatant throughout the movie, yet a lot of people seem to think that we're supposed to be on Kevin's side when he gets sent to bed early, but I don't know. But then there is also the whole thing where, like, because there's no defense of Buzz either, because Buzz is a piece of shit too, and then that brings in the whole thing of, like, you know, is it just bad parenting? But then that comes into the whole, there's like so many, much like with many other movies like this that people see many, many, many times over and know from front to back. There's all the fan theories surrounding this movie that are fun. Normally I don't go into the whole fan theory thing because most of them are just dumb. But there's a couple here. Like the whole, I know the most popular one that broke out recently was the whole Kevin McAllister as Jigsaw's origin story. And like that's kind of funny when you hear it the first time. But by the time the 500th person brings it up, it's, yeah. That's as played out as the Die Hard is a Christmas movie thing. But there's also the one that's actually pretty funny, especially with the more clues that line up. And that was the one that I think it was like from a few years ago or something, about how Peter McAllister, John Hurd's character, is like secretly a mobster of sorts, and like that's how they're so rich. And it's like, and the one clue that stands out is when he sees Pesci and the cop disguise, the first thing he says is, "Am I under arrest?" And that would explain why the kids are so shitty and all that. That one's pretty funny, but that does also go into, I think part of that theory was they're able to be this rich without Catherine O'Hara working. But to my understanding, there's some sort of, I don't know if it's in the script or something, but there's something that indicates that Catherine O'Hara's character is like a fashion designer, which is why their basement is full of mannequins. Which is a question not many people, like, it's one of those things where you're so familiar with a movie, there's so many questions that you just resign to just not asking. It's like, why do they have so many mannequins? That's weird, but Yeah, supposedly Kevin's mom is like a fashion designer or something, is what I think we're led to believe. And then this takes us into the, like I said, the more over-the-top fashion of the movie when we are introduced to the villains. Harry and Marv, played by Joe Pesci and Daniel Stern. Joe Pesci, the same year he was making Goodfellas, which is amazing. Apparently, when Harry's trademark, like mumbling when he gets hurt, was Pesci's way of not saying fuck on a PG movie set, basically. Um, and he was making Goodfellas while he was making this, and then 2 years later, I think he was making the sequel, and My Cousin Vinny came out at the same time. So there's that. And of course, Pesci's kind of playing the straight man to Daniel Stern's really just bumbling idiot Marv. And the thing here is that, and Marv does have some really good moments, like when he's confronting Kevin. The line that gets me every single year is "Sandy, don't visit the funeral homes, little buddy," and just moments like that really work also. But the two of them together, of course, are like there's. Once again, it's one of those things where it's almost impossible to not also acknowledge how many times this movie was copied and how much worse it was done before. And it's like when you look back on this, and it just feels like such a like there's no like this. It all centers around, are they too dumb and are they too bumbling? But I think Harry and I think Pesci's portrayal of Harry kind of ground that as much as they can, but I also kind of think, because a lot of people think it suddenly goes way over the top when the booby trap scenes are happening, but I don't know, I think that whole sort of thing is introduced when Harry and Marv are introduced, and through every one of their scenes we're gradually building up that this thing's going to have a cartoonish finale. And it's just a matter of, like I said, that huge balance of being able to do that with the sincerity. And I think one of the reasons that works so much is how sincere those scenes are. We obviously got, the running side story going on, where there's a lot of running jokes throughout the movie, whether it be Kevin running away from Old Man Marley, or there's the statue getting hit by every car that comes up, which they play on. They play on in the second one where they avoid it and you think the joke's over and then they hit it again. But then I also liked the second time it's shown in this one, where we don't even see the setup to it. We just see the dude picking the statue up and we assume they ran into it again. And all that. The use of Angels with Filthy Souls, which apparently an alarming amount of people don't realize is a fake movie that was made for this movie, which is obviously a take on Angels. It's the title is a take on Angels with Dirty Faces with Cagney. But there's also, like, this movie is really nothing like that one. You can tell it's just like this standard noir gangster sort of thing that they created. But props to them for convincing people that that is a real movie. And I also love the running joke of, I guess it wouldn't be a running joke, but just the pizza guy in general, and the take on Little Caesars, where he works for another ruler. He works for it's called Little Nero's, and my favorite part about that is the how Nero in the mythology played the fiddle while everything burned to the ground, and the tagline for Little Nero's is "No fiddling around." That is hilarious to me, and I laugh every single time I see it, no matter how many times I've seen this movie. But anyway, and yes, another one of those running jokes is Kevin running away from Old Man Marley, which is hilarious. But of course, we can probably kind of put together and imagine that a movie like this. Well, despite the fact that Harry does try to legitimately shoot Kevin in the second movie, when you're watching this first movie, you get a sense that there's not actually going to be a serial killer in this movie. And of course it ends up being the sort of, the Boo Radley scenario, where it's the guy where through a child's perspective seems, really threatening and really scary, but then when they start talking to each other, oh, he's actually just a nice, lonely old guy that just wants to see his family again. And it's like that, nowadays that is, like, definitely cliche, but when you look at it from the perspective of, like, 1990, even though there were still about 30 years apart between this and the movie adaptation, it is kind of it almost does feel like a really nice, sincere homage to, like, the Boo Radley scenario, and like I was talking about with Columbus's style, where it's like we're seeing stuff from a child's perspective. And yeah, and then the last scene when Kevin's looking out the window and they reunite. Like I said, the John Williams music, of course. It's just this really, it just really hits. Like it does seem like on the surface it'd be hard to balance that much sincerity with the over the top shit just before, like 5 minutes before it. This dude is hitting Harry and Marv in the face with a shovel, but it's like there is enough there that it really works on an emotional level. So I do really appreciate that. And then also going in and out of this, there is the just some of the side characters, like some of the characters that don't even matter. But when you get to know a movie well enough, you just love those characters the more you see them, no matter how long their screen time is. Like the cops, one of which, of course, is Larry Hankin, who's kind of just... They're just kind of going through the motions of getting this frantic call from Catherine O'Hara. And that they just seem not concerned at all, and it is hilarious. There's Jimmy, the grocery store kid, who has like been waiting his whole fucking life for his opportunity to chase down a shoplifter. It's like, who's there for 10 seconds, but it's... You just remember those people. And then, talking about the characters that are even just in the background, there's also this back and forth going on between what's happening with Kevin and Catherine O'Hara trying to get back. And I think those scenes work also because Catherine O'Hara really is, like, the heart of this movie. She's, like, really, really good here. Because not only is she, like, one of the greatest, comedic actresses, but also some of those really emotional moments. Sometimes the ones that aren't even that played up. A scene that I always really like is when they decide they're going to part ways, and they've just talked to Hope Davis, very young Hope Davis, and she's decided that she's going to wait to see if a spot opens up. And it's just this shot of her and John Hurd saying goodbye to each other in the airport. And you kind of really see the love between them as both a married couple and a concerned mother and father in this, almost traumatizing scenario. And it's just this really nice sort of light, moment of emotion between them that just really says so much with just being one moment. So I think that's another case where it's like he really can go really amp up the sentimentality, Hughes can, in his writing. But moments like that work just as much as the more, like swelling music sort of scenes. So there's that. And then, like I said, you get acquainted with the movie enough, and there's like so many questions that you have that could probably be considered, nitpicks or meaningless observations. Like, you may not notice in the first 10 or so times just the ridiculousness of that Murphy kid's trip, where they've got to go from Chicago, and then they're going to pick up his grandma in Missouri before they go to Orlando, and apparently they're driving, and stuff like that. And then there's stuff like, if Kevin is so organized, he does a day's worth of booby traps in less than an hour. It takes him an hour to run home from the church, do the whole setup, and then make that macaroni and cheese. And it's like, why would he make that macaroni and cheese 2 minutes before he's expecting them to show up? There is clearly a clock on that microwave. I don't know, and it doesn't matter. And then there is like just also meaningless things, like why is Catherine O'Hara putting on her makeup while everybody else is eating on the plane? This is before they even realize Kevin's gone. And the reason I bring these up is because you would just make these random stupid observations or whatever watching any other movie. But when you go back to this, instead of being like nitpicks or whatever, it almost becomes a tradition to ask those questions. It doesn't matter what the answer is. Why didn't the pizza guy call the cops or something when he thought there was a whole gun battle going on with the McAllisters? Which some people link to the fan theory of Peter being a criminal, but that's beside the point. Remember, he did have that stint on the first season of The Sopranos, so there is that. And yeah, and also just random observations like when Harry goes over the tripwire in the hallway, and then he's laying there, and then Marv, the whole tarantula thing. And we get that shot of the tarantula landing on Harry. We realize that Harry's wearing a wedding ring. That has always given me so many questions. But then at the same time, it doesn't matter, because that leads to what, in my opinion, is probably one of the funniest moments in the movie. where we see this scene from Harry's perspective, and he's under the impression, not knowing the tarantula's there, that Marv has just suddenly, out of nowhere, lost his mind and is about to kill Harry for no reason. um, and all that, and just stuff like that. And not whether it be that or the traps or the back and forth between them or the way they interact with Kevin or whatever, all this stuff and the same stuff over and over again is still funny every single year. And you could say, oh, nostalgia or whatever the fuck you want to say, but that's, I know, it just still, like, just always really works for me. It's one of those movies where when this time of year comes around, and I know I'm going to be revisiting some of these again, this is one of the ones I always kind of look forward to the most, going back to, just because. And there's hardly, I think we're past the point now where I even notice new things, but that still doesn't matter because there's just so much about it I like revisiting anyway. So there is that. And like I said, it scored a couple of Oscar nominations for Somewhere in My Memory for Song, and then of course Williams' score in general. Which is absolutely amazing. Setting the Trap, especially, is a really amazing track. And then this is one of those movies in, like, the big cities that I think they do a lot traditionally, where it's, there's screenings for the movie with the live orchestra, and it's like, that's gotta be amazing. So, yeah, so I think that's about as much as I have to say about this one. The sequel I also love, maybe not as much, but I do remember thinking when I was younger that the second one may be funnier, but that's also probably just the general, over-the-top nature of it. Like, the traps are almost the entire second half of the movie, it feels like. And they're, like, so over the top, getting all the way down to when Harry sticks his head in the toilet and everything explodes, or Marv turning into the skeleton. And I know some people say that practically scarred them when they were younger. I just think it's like it's the scream. It's the fact that the skeleton still has the beard. That whole thing is just so funny to me. So, yeah, and it also has the whole pigeon lady subplot and all that, which is kind of I mean, they're obviously trying to recreate the Old Man Marley thing, and obviously not near to the sincerity, I don't think. Like, I consider the Pigeon Lady stuff to be kind of the who really gives a fuck part of this movie, and doesn't quite hit as emotionally as the Old Man Marley stuff, but I do still really love the sequel also, and Tim Curry, of course. But this is the one I definitely come back to more, so yeah. So I think the next one is probably going to be Elf, if I had to guess. And then we'll just kind of go from there and see how many of these we end up doing by the time the holiday itself comes around. So, and then I'm going to be doing a versus, like, right after this, like, turn the camera off and then right back on sort of thing. So, that's not related to Christmas in any way whatsoever. So, until all the other stuff we'll be doing, I think that's it for this.